كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية يكاد زيتها يضيء ولو لم تمسس ولا غربية يكاد زيتها يضيء ولو لم تمسسه نار نور على نور يهدي الله لنوره من يشاء ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس والله بكل شيء عليم. في بيوت أذن الله أن ترفع ويذكر فيها اسمه يسبح له فيها بالغدو والآصال. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عن جابر بن عبد الله العنصاري عن فاطمة الزهراء عليها السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله أنها قالت: دخل علي أبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله في بعض الأيام فقال: السلام عليك يا فاطمة. فقلت: عليك السلام. قال: إني أجد في بدني ضعفا. فقلت له: أعيذك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف. فقال: يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني فغطيني به. فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فغطيته به وسرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله. فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسن عليه السلام قد أقبل وقال: السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت وعليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال يا أماه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت نعم إن جدك تحت الكساء. فأقبل الحسن نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جداه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكساء؟ فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب حوضي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معه تحت الكساء، فما كانت إلا ساعة وإذا بولدي الحسين قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أماه. فقلت وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي. فقال لي يا أماه إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله. فقلت نعم إن جدك وأخاك تحت الكساء. فدنا الحسين نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا جداه، السلام عليك يا من اختاره الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكساء؟ فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا شافع أمتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. فأقبل عند ذلك أبو الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله. فقلت نعم ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ فقال له عليك السلام يا أخي ويا وصيي وخليفتي وصاحب لوائي، قد أذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء. ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله، أتأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء؟ قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بضعتي، قد أذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء. فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء، أخذ أبي رسول الله بطرفي الكساء وأومأ بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاصتي وحامتي، لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي، يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم. أنا حرب لمن حاربهم، وسلم لمن سالمهم، وعدو لمن عاداهم، ومحب لمن أحبهم. إنهم مني وأنا منهم، فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم، وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. فقال الله عز وجل: يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي، إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئة ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل: يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل: هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة، هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل: يا ربي أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله: نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال: السلام عليك يا رسول الله. العلي الأعلى يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام، ويقول لك: وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيئة ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم، وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم، فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام: يا أمين وحي الله، فإنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لأبيه: إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول: إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. فقال علي لأبي: يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله: والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا، ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي عليه السلام: إذن والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال أبي رسول الله يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله همه ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته فقال علي عليه السلام إذن والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. سورة مباركة الفاتحة.
بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات. بانو یہ عابد کو بتلا رہی ہے میری سکینہ کو نیند آ رہی ہے بانو یہ عابد کو بتلا رہی ہے میری سکینہ کو نیند آ رہی ہے کہہ دو ہواؤں سے آہستہ آئے کہہ دو پرندوں سے غلنا مچائیں کہہ دو تیروں سے واپس نہ جائیں کہہ دو اندھیروں سے واپس نہ جائیں جاگی ہوئی چین کچھ پا رہی ہے میری سکینہ کو نیند آ رہی ہے میری سکینہ کو نیند آ رہی ہے شاید رسن کی اذیت ہوئی کم ماتھا کرو بیبیو شور ماتم سجاد زنجیر بولے نہ اس دم سجاد زنجیر بولے نہ اس دم شاید غموں کی کڑی جا رہی ہے میری سکینہ کو نیند آ رہی ہے میری سکینہ کو نیند آ رہی ہے صلو علی محمد و آل محمد
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. اولاد سیدہ پر، اولاد سیدہ پر کیسی شام آئی، اولاد سیدہ پر کیسی شام آئی، اولاد سیدہ پر. سجاد رو رہے ہیں زینب سے منہ چھپا کر، کیسی شام آئی، اولاد سیدہ پر. ایک سمت بے کفن ہے بھائی کا اس کے لاشا، عباس کی بہن کا باقی رہا نہ پردہ. اب سوچتی ہے زینب مانگے کفن یا چادر، کیسی شام آئی، اولاد سیدہ پر. بازو کہیں پرے ہے لاشا کہیں پرا ہے، زینب کی بے بسی پر غازی تڑپ رہا ہے، روتی ہے بے کسی بھی فرش عزا بچھا کر، کیسی شام آئی، اولاد سیدہ پر. جو گھر میں دو قدم بھی پیدل نہیں چلی ہے، ایک دن میں وہی زینب عباس بن گئی ہے، پہرے پہ آ گئی ہے تنہا علم اٹھا کر، کیسی شام آئی، اولاد سیدہ پر. سجاد سے لپٹ کر کہتی رہی سکینہ، احساس ہو رہا ہے میں ہو گئی یتیمہ، ظالم ڈرا رہا ہے نیزہ دکھا دکھا کر، کیسی شام آئی، اولاد سیدہ پر. لاشوں کے درمیان وہ بابا کو ڈھونڈتی ہے، منہ اپنا پیٹ کر یہ فریاد کر رہی ہے، قدموں میں ہی سلا دو بابا مجھے بلا کر، کیسی شام آئی، اولاد سیدہ پر. جب آ گئے نجف سے بیٹی کو ملنے بابا، زانوں پہ رکھ کے سریے کہنے لگی وہ دکھیاں، زینب اجڑ گئی ہے کرب و بلا بسا کر، کیسی شام آئی اولاد سیدہ پر، خیموں کے ساتھ جھولا بستر بھی جل گیا ہے، ناموں سے مصطفیٰ کو بھاگی کہا گیا ہے، لے جائیں گے صبح کو قیدی ہمیں بنا کر، کیسی شام آئی اولاد سیدہ پر، گزرے گی کیسے یاور مقتل سے شہزادی، عابد نے رات مومن یہ سوچ کر گزاری، زینب کا نام لے گا ظالم تو مسکرا کر، کیسی شام آئی اولاد سیدہ پر، اولاد سیدہ پر، صلوات محمد و آل محمد۔
محمد وآل Muhammad salawat. Allah. Alhamdulillah, we have been blessed once again by the Ahlul Bayt that we are able to gather here for an additional 2 nights for a short series by Sheikh Muhammad Abbas Panju. We haven't heard him live for a while, so inshallah it will be good to reconnect with you, Sheikh, inshallah. The usual things, parking, please park properly, and when you leave, please leave quietly. Finally, can I ask you to recite with me Dua Shifai Mariz for Brother Riaz Rajbali and for all those who are unwell. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amman yujibul mudtarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su. Amman yujibul mudtarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su. Amman yujibul mudtarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su. أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. May I also request you to recite Surah Fatiha for the donors of this majlis and for Marhum Muhammad Raza Lakha, Marhum Muslim Kanji, Marhum Fazal Virani, Marhum Riaz Anwar Rajbali, Marhum Munawar Karmali, Marhum Shiraz Muhammad Ali Ghulam Hussain, and all our Marhumin. Al-Fatiha. Can I please ask you to welcome our host, Sheikh Hashim Norozadeh, with a loud salawat.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A kind reminder to myself, I am not your host. I just open and close the door. That's my job. Every Husainiya is a Shafa Khana. The other night we witnessed something. You all were here. Alhamdulillah, those who follow the line of Sayyid al-Shuhada, he will take their hand in their time of need. Your host is none other than Hazrat Fatima Zahra Salamun alayha. Ali Imam Manasto, Manam Ghulam Ali, Hezar Jan Garami, Fidai Name Ali. 2 minutes is what it takes to, inshallah, give yourselves thawab. At the beginning of the series, this Muharram, you all saw there was a wall here. Imam Hussein broke down those walls with your help. And inshallah, in 4 days' time, you've seen the steels are outside, heavy steels. They will be put in, and that blue wall, inshallah, will also come down. So when you see from here, you'll go see right through to that brick wall and be one big square. Salawat. The floor will come up, so it'll be one level, and we're going straight that way past the outside kitchen, and there's another canopy going to put there. Alhamdulillah, 3 rooms up in the loft. Inshallah, that's phase 2. Phase 3, inshallah, those windows, inshallah, and there's a space which is as much as this, as large as this, between the ladies' hall and the men's hall, which is unused. It's part of the footprint inside. That will also, those walls will come down, and then, inshallah, the ladies, we need to take care of the women who are the backbone of our community. They have children. They are the ones who raise the children. Mother, why they say to you, don't lose your mother tongue? Why is that? Yes, we speak in English, but mother tongue relates to the mother. It's very important because she is the one who nurtures the child. So inshallah, phase 3 is taking those walls down and connecting with the sliding windows, but we'll give most of the space to the ladies, inshallah. All it needs is, we've now that figure of 53 has gone to 80,000 raised. We're 20,000 short of raising 100,000. And we pay the construction workers as they do the work, we pay them as the materials and everything. So I'm leaving it up to you guys. Everything is up to you to do what you can. This is your place. This is not an Afghani center. No. It says the Imam Hussein Foundation. This is your center. It's open to all of you. Anytime you want to have majalis here, you want to have your let's say Fatihas here or commemoration, we are in your khidmat. Alhamdulillah, most of my friends here I've known for many, many years. They used to come to my house in Dollisel Lane. You know, some people have been coming there for now 35, 40 years. Alhamdulillah, when we needed help, the Khojas came to our help, and Alhamdulillah, they contributed hugely to the buying of this center. With the help of Allah, Bahaqi Hazrat Fatima Zahra, Salamun alayha. So I don't want to take up any of your time. There's a machine there. You can give cash, card, whatever you want. But do it on these nights. And do it with your own hands. That's my humble request. Bar Muhammad wa ali Bayt Muhammad salawat.
Ahsant, Haji Hashim. Ahsant. Please welcome Sheikh Muhammad Abbas Panju with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers, please move forward as well, please, brothers, while you stood. Ahsant.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله بارئ الخلائق الأجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء، حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما ولي الله الحجة ابن الحسن صاحب الأمر والزمان. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم وعلى غاصبي حقوقهم وعلى منكري فضائلهم من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. آمين رب العالمين. أما بعد، قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم: اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. إن لقتل الحسين حرارة في قلوب المؤمنين لا تبرد أبدا. صدق النبي وآمنا به. نوروا مجالسكم بذكر محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أحبائي, you find that the days which we are living through, 11th of Muharram, the 12th of Muharram, and the 13th of Muharram, historically are 3 days that changed or contributed towards the manner in which Islamic history changed. And you find that the foundation for ensuring the continuity of the revolution of Imam al-Hussein and the massacre of Imam al-Hussein that took place on the day of Ashura, ensuring that the values, the principles and the madhlumiyat of Ashura continues, this foundation was built on the 11th, 12th and the 13th of Shahr Muharram. And it is important, as a lover of Amirul Mu'mineen, as a Shi'i, as a Husseini, as a Matami, that the importance of the 11th, 12th and 13th of Shahr Muharram are not only revived, but we live through the grief of these days. And in light of this, inshallah, for the time that we have tonight, I would like to shed some light on a few of the events that happened during this time. And you find that within the books of history, from amongst the Amma and the Khassa, you will find within Tarikh al-Tabari. Similarly, you will find inside of Bihar al-Anwar between volume 44 and volume 46 that from the day of Ashura, when Sayyid al-Shuhada was martyred, the skies rained blood for 40 days. You find this within the Sunni books and the Shia books of history. And there are historical events that have been recorded as far and as wide as Palestine, where such that it is recorded by Ibn Jawzi that even in Palestine, on the day of Ashura, when they would turn the pebbles in the desert, they would find human blood oozing underneath or from beneath the sun. The issue of the skies raining blood, you will find that even within science, there are a number of scientists that have been exploring and trying to understand the event of rain blood. And there has been a number of incidences in the 15th century, in the 12th century, where even in Europe, the raining of blood has been established as a historical event that occurred. For you will find within the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle for dates that match the Islamic Hijri date on the 10th of Ashura 61 AH, it is recorded that in the United Kingdom, over here, that bread and butter mysteriously turned into blood. It rained blood, and even within France, it was recorded in the 15th century at some point that it rained blood. For you have scientists over here who are trying to understand the reality of rain blood. And as far as I know, in my humble research, that till today, there are a number of theories that prove what, or number of theories that kind of suggest what the reality of blood rain is, but the conclusion is inconclusive. Yani, it is research under progress. One interesting thing caught my eye. The University of Wisconsin, when they published a paper in terms of understanding blood rain and the reality of blood rain, within the opening lines, within the introduction of this paper, the researcher states that my goal of researching the reality of blood rain is to separate it from supernatural explanations. Meaning that this line of research is trying to understand a historical scientific phenomenon by isolating belief in the supernatural, meaning the existence of God. And you find that this is a manhaj. This is a path, unfortunately, where a great number of academics fall into a trap, where we try to discover and understand the realities or some of the abnormalities that may occur within the realm of existence, try and understand the reality behind these causes through a means of science, and separate science from religion. This in itself is a logical flaw. Even in mantiq, as per the rules of logic, such type of a conclusion is a flaw. By the way, even when you study logic from an Islamic science, you will find that within the most preliminary texts of mantiq that are taught within the seminaries, you will find, for example, Sheikh Muzaffar rahmatullah alayh, who teaches mantiq, or who authored the book of Mantiq al-Muzaffar, which is taught at the Muqaddimat level. In his introduction, he states very clearly that the rules of logic, which is a science which you study in order to arrange arguments such that you are able to derive conclusions that are correct, this entire science of logic does not encompass issues of the supernatural. For even you find that the greatest authors of mantiq, or the greatest authors of the science of logic, will tell you there comes a time where the intellect must submit and bow down to a higher power, a power higher than the power of the intellect. And this we will see much clearer, inshallah, in tomorrow's majlis, and we discuss the relationship between the Quran and the intellect. However, for me, what I would like to say is that as a person reads Islamic history and as a person studies Islamic history, it is absolutely important that Islamic history is studied and understood within the light of Usuluddin. Meaning that a person needs to be and my conversation over here or our discussion over here is in particular to Islamic history. Islamic history that has to do with the history from the Anbiya until the time of Imam al-Hujjah Ajalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. You will find that majority of the mistakes when it comes to a researcher's conclusion in Islamic history is when they analyze historical text independent of Usuluddin. If your understanding in Usuluddin is not grounded, at best, you will be misguided in history. And this misguidance can lead to kufr. You find, and we had the conversation today with some of the brothers on the way to London. You take, for example, and I will use this example with their permission, inshallah. You take, for example, the Maqtal of Imam al-Hussein and the heroics of Ahlul Bayt on the day of Ashura. You have within a number of historical texts that Sayyid al-Shuhada, when he entered into the battlefield, in a number of the attacks that he participated in, because you will find within the books of the Maqtal that says he attacked the right wing and dismantled it. He attacked the left wing and he dismantled it. He attacked the center flank and made them retreat to an extent that the enemies themselves caused a stampede for each other, killing each other. Have you seen when there's a stampede and there's a narrow pathway and the people are trying to escape? On one hand you have Imam al-Hussein and the frontline horsemen are under direct attack from Sayyid al-Shuhada. Their only way was to turn back and push back the cavalry and the lines behind them, causing a stampede because no one wanted their sorry necks to come under the Dhul-Fiqar or the sword of Imam al-Hussein. For you find that historians state in a single attack, Sayyid al-Shuhada, which he participated in, 1,000 of the kuffar were sent to Jahannam wa bi'sa al-masir. If a person begins to analyze this part of history, how can 1,000 men be killed by one single person? You find that as a historian who does not have a faith system, math from a superficial level, math may not add up. But however, if you open this door of critiquing history, then majority of history actually disappears from within your hands. You take, for example, from the miracles of Rasulullah. A miracle of Rasulullah was what? Again, narrated in Sunni books and Shia books. That whenever Rasulullah walked under the sun, one of the particularities and the khususiyat of Rasulullah is that he never had a shadow. He didn't have a shadow. Can you use science to come and prove this phenomena? You have two choices in front of you. Either you study the seerah of Rasulullah, having understood your usuluddin, which then helps you understand that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who alters the laws of science to wake man up to understand that there is a master architect in control of this universe greater than you and I. Because many times man falls under the misconception that they are in charge. One of our greatest downfalls, the downfall of human civilization is intellectual Pharaohism. The Fir'aun of the body, or the Fir'aun of the Fir'aun of economics. Fir'aun in terms of political leadership is weak, but the Fir'aun of the intellect, who only believes what the intellect can submit to, is against Tawheed. This means he didn't believe that Allah is ala kulli shay'in alim. He believes his aql is ala kulli shay'in alim. And hence you'll find a number of cases like these in history. But if I have understood through my usuluddin that these historical personalities who I am trying to understand through history are divinely appointed men who have been given divinely appointed capabilities, and through these divinely appointed capabilities I can distinguish them and distinguish them from the rest of mankind. This is what separates them from the rest of us because of their divine position. Then in this way, understanding history in general and the fada'il of Ahlul Bayt becomes something that is absolutely cut clear. However, if the usuluddin is weak, the traces are seen even in the conclusions of a historian. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajwal fa'al. For you find that it is important for us to study history in the light of usuluddin. And number two, that if science is not able to come to a conclusion, it doesn't necessitate the invalidity of the occurrence of that particular event. Science is nothing but the discovery of a system that has been created by Allah. And if you didn't discover anything from that system, doesn't mean that the system does not exist. It's a logical fallacy. We have to be careful. For if we understand this, you find that from the day of Ashura, 40 days it rained blood from the skies. Number one. Number two, the historians narrate for us that the women and the children from the camp of Imam al-Hussein remained in Karbala on the day of Ashura, the night of Sham Ghariban, when their tents were burnt, and on the 11th of Muharram, on a day like this, at the time of Salatul Dhuhr, the women and the children were rounded up by the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad al-La'in, and they were taken to Kufa on a day like this, 11th of Muharram. In fact, the narrations mention that is on the 11th of Muharram, that and in the morning time, Umar ibn Sa'ad collected the dead bodies of everyone from their camp. They recited Salatul Mayyit over their dead people, and they buried them whilst leaving the body of Imam al-Hussein and his companions unburied on the plains of Karbala. Notice again, people who abided by fiqh but were hypocrites when it came to usuluddin. They recited salat, mashallah, but they had enmity towards imamat. The historians mention that on the 11th of Muharram, at the time of Zawan, the women and the children are rounded up by the enemies, and they are leaving from Karbala to enter into Kufa. And as they reached the city of Kufa, you know that between Karbala and Kufa, the distance is close to 80 kilometers. And the travel route that was used even in 61 AH does not make the distance anything much greater or lesser than 80 kilometers, give or take, plus or minus on each side. For the narrations mention, the historians mention, that on a night like this, when the women reached the city of Kufa, they found that the gates to the city at the border were closed. This border, the olden border of Masjid of Kufa, was at the gates of Masjid Hannana, what is present-day Masjid Hannana. And it is over here, on a night like this, that the women and the children were made to sleep under the open sky, tied in ropes, waiting for the 12th of Muharram to enter into the city of Kufa. They were made to sleep hungry. In fact, Sheikh Muhammad al-Ha'iri in his Maktal mentions that the children and the women were tied in ropes, sitting under the dark skies, hungry and thirsty, while the enemy sat across from them and ate their food, laughing at the children while eating. High on a night like this. This area of Masjid Hannana is also the same place where 3 other historical events happened. Masjid Hannana, you will also find that there is a mazar over there, a place of ziyarah, where they have the maqam of the blessed head of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Historians mention, we will talk about the head of Sayyid al-Shuhada shortly, but it was kept over here. This is one importance, which is why within the books of ziyarah you find within the adab and the akhlaq of ziyarat of Najaf al-Ashraf, when you visit Amir al-Mu'mineen and you perform the ziyarah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, you also recite the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein out of respect for the blessed head that was placed in this area close to Masjid Hannana for a night. Number 3, the significance of Masjid Hannana actually goes back to the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen. You find that within history it is narrated that Amir al-Mu'mineen, when his apparent khilafah was in Kufa, he would come to Masjid al-Hannana in the darkness of the night, and this is where he would spend the majority of his time in Salatul Layl, and where he would spend a majority of his night in contemplation, such that ulama and mujtahideen in Najaf al-Ashraf, even till today, when they have hajat or they are going through difficult times, we've seen with our eyes that they actually go to Masjid Hannana to recite a 2 rakat salat. Believe it or not, their hajats that are fulfilled and they come out of perhaps the most difficulties. Hannana is derived from the word inhana. And again, the history states that the significance of Masjid Hannana is that when Amir al-Mu'mineen became shaheed on the 21st of Shahr Muharram, as you know, they were bringing the janazah of Amir al-Mu'mineen in the darkness of the night. Imam Hassan and Imam al-Hussein were carrying the janazah from the back, and the 2 angels were carrying the janazah from the front. The historians mention that from Masjid al-Kufa, as they were going to Najaf, where Amir al-Mu'mineen is currently buried, they passed through Masjid Hannana. And it is over here that the palm trees actually bent down in ruku out of reverence for the passing janazah, which is why it is known as Hannana. For on a night like this, the women slept outside of Masjid Hannana. You find that some historians are of the opinion that when the women were taken from Karbala to Kufa, the severed heads of the shuhada were also taken with them. You find that historically, if you were to dive a little deeper into history, this is inaccurate. In fact, the most accurate narrations, or we should say the most mashhur narrations, because a hadith that is sahih will not have much significance using the criteria of sahih, for example, which is used in deriving a fiqhi hukum, is not generally applicable when it comes to history. We have to work with that which is much more mashhur, which is much more famously narrated, and that which is surrounded by indicators. You find that a majority, or what is mashhur amongst the historians, is that the blessed head and the severed head of Imam al-Hussein was actually taken to Kufa on the 10th day of Muharram. For as soon as Shimr bin Dhil Jawshan al-La'in committed this horrendous crime of separating the head of Imam al-Hussein from his body, Umar ibn Sa'ad commanded for the head to be taken to Kufa straight away, on the same day, before Sham Ghariban. You find that Sheikh al-Mufid and Sheikh al-Tabari are of the opinion that the blessed head of Imam al-Hussein was taken from Karbala to Kufa because they were fighting for the prize. They didn't want to delay the prize, which was the severed head of Imam al-Hussein, back to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. So Sheikh Mufid and Sheikh Tabari are of the opinion that the blessed head, Umar ibn Sa'ad gave the blessed head of Imam al-Hussein to Khuli and Hamid ibn Muslim to go and take it to Kufa. And they can show it to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad so that their prizes and their rewards can be prepared for them. And it was in Umar ibn Sa'ad's best interest that the head of Imam al-Hussein should be sent as soon as possible, because he was being promised the governorship of the land of Ray. So paperwork, as we would say in this day and age, needs to be completed. However, when you look into this historical narration, you will find that it is highly improbable that Umar ibn Sa'ad would select Khuli to take the head of Imam al-Hussein to Kufa right before Sham Ghariban happened. Why? There is a number of indicators. Number one, we have numerous texts that through which we are able to verify that Khuli was actually Al-La'in, Mal'un. Khuli was actually in Karbala in Sham Ghariban, because one of the events that took place where the earrings were snatched from the ears of one of the women of Ahlul Bayt was actually the hands of Khuli. So we are able to understand that Khuli was actually involved in the plundering of the tents, and he could not have gone to Kufa. This is one. Number two, we also understand that the person who was responsible for beheading Imam al-Hussein was Shimr. And this, historians, you have, if you go back to the books of history, there are at least about 7 names of people who claim to have severed the head of Imam al-Hussein. Shimr is one of them, Khuli is also one of them. But however, we are of absolute confidence and we know for sure that it was Shimr who beheaded the Imam, because we have this narrated inside of Ziyarat al-Nahiya, where the 12th Imam, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajjal faraja, establishes that it is Shimr al-La'in who sat on the chest of Imam al-Hussein and performed this ultimate crime. So if it was Shimr who beheaded the Imam, it is very unlikely that Shimr would commit the crime but then give the head to Khuli to go and take the accolades and the rewards from Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. So we understand over here, and especially if you understand the bickering nature of the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad. These were a group of mercenaries that even between themselves they had no loyalty. Yes, they were in the battlefield together. Yes, they were fighting for the same army. Yes, they were fighting against the same enemy. But this doesn't mean that they were united. Internally, they were bickering amongst themselves and were ready to shed each other's blood at the earliest possible or at the first available instance. And the proof for this is the existence of Shimr himself. Shimr was sent by Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad to Karbala as a commander of a cavalry to make sure that Umar ibn Sa'ad actually does his job. Because from the 1st of Muharram all the way to the 7th and the 8th of Muharram, Umar ibn Sa'ad al-La'in was reluctant on how much force he needs to apply on Imam al-Hussein. So their leadership or the government saw him as shaky, and hence Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad sent Shimr to Karbala to ensure that if Umar ibn Sa'ad is not able to do this job, he should be taken down as the commander of the army, and you, who is second in charge, actually take full leadership and take full credit. So you find that if this is the nature of the army, it is very unlikely for Shimr to perform the crime, but for Khuli to go and present the trophy to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. And this sort of hypothesis or this sort of justification is actually verified because we have a scholar by the name of Sheikh Muhammad Hussein Ha'iri in Kitab al-Ma'ali, together in the text Tibr al-Mathab, it is narrated that it is actually Shimr bin Dhil Joshan who was dispatched by Umar ibn Sa'ad on the 10th day of Ashura, before the time of Salatul Maghrib, to go with the blessed head of Imam al-Hussein from Karbala and present it to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad in Kufa. In fact, there is a narration that happened, and there is an incident that happened over here. You know, the historians tell us that when Shimr carried the severed head of Imam al-Hussein, he entered into his house and he left the blessed head in a sack. And he came into the house and he got into his bed. His wife was a lover of Ali Muhammad. Don't be surprised. Fir'aun had a wife as pure as Asya. She was a lover of Ahlul Bayt. For he comes into the house and is absolutely tired. And he says his wife was aware that Shimr has gone for war, but she was not very clear as to who the enemy was. So she says to him, "What did you achieve from this war that you went to?" He says, "I have been able to bring back the severed head of the Khariji, for which we will get the gold and the silver equivalent to mountains." So she looked at him and she said, "And what is the name of this person? Who was this Khariji, such an important Khariji that you are going to get so much wealth?" He says to her, "Hussein ibn Ali." She turned around, the narration says, in shock. And she said, "Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib?" He said, "Yes." The narration, the historian mentions, she jumped out of bed and began weeping, saying, "I can never be in the same house as you, the enemy of Allah." She herself narrates, she went into the outhouse, and this cloth or this sack in which the blessed head of Imam al-Hussein was, she says, "I saw a nur emanating from this head to the heavens. And there were doves in the night that were circling around this nur." She says, "I went a little bit closer. And she says, I could hear a humming voice, a humming sound coming out from this severed head." She says, "I lifted the head while my hands were trembling. The blessed head of Imam al-Hussein was reciting the Quran." She fainted. When she fainted, she sees in her dream that from the heavens there is a massive opening of light. And there are a number of personalities who divinely descend down. She sees 3 men and she sees 2 women. She says, "I asked, who are these 2 women?" The first one replied back and she said, "I am Khadija, the mother of Fatima." She says, "I was going to ask the second woman, who are you?" He says, "But before I could ask her who she was, I got my answer." How? He says, "When this woman showed the severed head of Imam al-Hussein in my eyes, she cried out, 'Waladi ya Hussein!' Oh my son, oh Hussein, Allah." His wife of Shimr says that Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra hugged the severed head of Imam al-Hussein and she wept in such a painful manner. She says, "I woke up astounded." She says, "I was weeping and I was crying. And I was looking at the severed head of Imam al-Hussein, and I was wondering, how could I be of help to you, Ya Aba Abdullah? It says, at this moment, Shimr woke up and said to her, give me the head so that I may get the reward. She took a stance and she said, O enemy of God, I do not consider you as my wife, and nor shall I give you this head. The narrations mention Shimr struck her on the head with such force, she became a Shahida there and then. These are events that happened on a night like this. The tragedies of Karbala and the tragedies of Sayyida Zainab. Today's Masa'ib. Ahibba'i, from all the narrations and all the tragedies that took place on the day of Ashura, the shahadat of each and every one of the shuhada was great. But tonight I want to mention for you 3 people on the day of Ashura, or 3 people on the plains of Karbala. They were attacked in such a manner. That these 3 people, when they fell down on the plains of Karbala, they fell down face first. Allahu Akbar. This is why you find in Ziyarat al-Nahiya, Imam al-Hujjah says, salams on those cheeks that fell on the plains of Karbala. Allahu Akbar. Every shaheed's cheeks fell on the plains of Karbala, but 3 are distinguished. The first one, Allah ya Shia Zale Muhammad Matamiza. The narration mentions when Qasim was on the battlefield on the day of Ashura, he was tying his shoelace when no one was ready to come into war against him. The narration mentions that while he was tying his lace, an enemy came from the back. فَضَرَبَهُ بِسَيْفِهِ عَلَى رَأْسِهِ. He struck him with a sword on the head. Do you know the intensity with which Qasim was hit? The Maktal says, فَوَقَعَ الْغُلَامَ عَلَى وَجْهِهِ. The strike was such on Qasim. Qasim fell on the plains of Karbala face first. You know how painful the strike was on Qasim? Almost all the shuhada, when they became shaheed, they said, Alayka minni salam ya Aba Abdullah. But the strike on Qasim was so painful that when he fell face first, he didn't say Alayka minni salam. He cried out to his uncle, he said, Adrikni ya Aba. Help me, oh my uncle. Allah. The second of the shuhada. And you know the second of the shuhada, the one who conquered the river Furat. The narrations mention that when Abul Fadl al-Abbas was on his horse, both his arms have been severed. He's looking at the blood that is pouring down, and his hands are on the plains of Karbala. He's holding the mashk with his teeth. He's balancing the alam with his chest, and what is remaining from the severed hands. The Maktal mentions that 2 arrows came, or 3 arrows came. One pierced the chest of Abul Fadl, another arrow pierced the eye of Abul Fadl, and the 3rd arrow, perhaps it hurt Abul Fadl the most. This is the arrow that pierced the mashk of Sakina, because as the water began pouring down onto the plains of Karbala, the heart of Abul Fadl melted. So he's on his horse. He is thinking, how do I go back to the Khaybaga? How can I go back to the Khaybaga to Sakina when there is no water? And if I go back to the Furat, I don't have any arms to fill the mashk. The Maktal mentions at this moment an enemy came and he struck Abul Fadl with a tent pole on the head. When Abul Fadl fell down, shuhada fall with their hands, but Abbas didn't have any arms. The Maktal mentions he fell face first on the plains of Karbala. the arrow that was lodged in the eye of Abu Fadil got pushed even deeper into the third cheek that touched the plains of Karbala is a cheek that was not from the Shuhada. It was not a cheek from the day of Ashura. This is a cheek that fell on the plains of Karbala on a day like this, on the 11th of Muharram. Allah, ya Shi'at al Muhammad. This is the final part of the musibah. The Maktal mentions on the 11th of Muharram, Umar ibn Sa'ad gathered up all the children and the women to take them as prisoners from Karbala to Kufa. He then said to all the women that they should be tied up with ropes. Allahu Akbar. As they were mounted onto the camels, Umar ibn Sa'ad said, let us burn the hearts of these women, Allah. It is not enough that they burnt the khaymas yesterday. It is not enough that they have killed all their men. Umar ibn Sa'ad says, let us burn the hearts of these women. They said, how? He said, let us take the women through the Maidan. Let them see the trampled and the mangled body of Imam al-Hussein. This is going to increase their grief. The Maktal mentions over here that as soon as the camel of Sayyida Zainab was brought and Sayyida Zainab saw the mangled body of Imam al-Hussein, Sayyida Zainab threw herself from the camel. The narrations mention Zainab fell on the plains of Karbala face first. They said why? Because Zainab's hands were tied behind her back. Matam Hussein, Matam Zainab. سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے،
سن کے
اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، ننگے سر شام کیوں گئی زینب ہے، ننگے سر شام کیوں گئی زینب، یہی سجاد کی بیماری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، ننگے سر شام کیوں گئی زینب ہے، ننگے سر شام کیوں گئی زینب، یہی سجاد کی بیماری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، گردن میں توک بھاری اور پاؤں میں چھالے ہیں، غیرت میں خون روئے زنجیر کیا سنبھالے، لوگوں امت میں ثانیے زہرا، میری دابی سے گزاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب بھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، گردن سے لہو جاری ہے، اب سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، اب سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے۔ کلثوم رقیہ کے ہاتھوں میں رسیاں ہے، معصوم سکینہ کے ہونٹوں پہ سسکیاں ہے، بدن زخمی ہوا مہاری کا اور گردن میں توک بھاری ہے، ابھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری 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 ہے۔ کلثوم رقیہ کے ہاتھوں میں رسیاں ہیں، معصوم سکینہ کے ہونٹوں پہ سسکیاں ہیں، بدن زخمی ہوا مہاری کا اور گردن میں توک بھاری ہے، ابھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، ابھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، ابھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے۔ شاملین سارے پتھر گرا رہے تھے، قیدی یتیم بچے آنسو بہا رہے تھے، چاروں جانب شرابیوں کا ہجوم، خون روئے کھڑا مہاری ہے، ابھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری 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 ہے۔ شاملین سارے پتھر گرا رہے تھے، قیدی یتیم بچے آنسو بہا رہے تھے، چاروں جانب شرابیوں کا ہجوم، خون روئے کھڑا مہاری ہے، ابھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، ابھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے، ابھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری ہے۔ فضا کے پیچھے زینب خطبے سنا رہی تھی، سیدانیوں پہ امت پتھر گرا رہی تھی، جرم کیا تھا علی کی بیٹی کا، اس کے سر سے ردا اتاری ہے، ابھی سجاد کی آنکھوں سے لہو جاری 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 ہے۔ دیکھا جو رسیوں میں فضا کو حبشیوں نے، دربار ہلانا نا زینب کی سسکیوں نے، جس کا کوئی بھی مددگار نہیں، ہائے اجڑی دیے لاچاری ہے، ابھی سجاد کی آنکھوں
لہو جاری ہے قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی کی وہ سفر کتے باج براوا آئے درد ستاری اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی عابد نو پتھراں دے وچ قیدی سفراں چ سکینہ نو کدی بہنا نو قیدی ہتھاں دے نال سابدی رہ گئی زہرا دی کمائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی اللہ جانے سین زینب نے کی وہ قید نبھائی عابد نو پتھراں دے وچ قیدی سفراں چ سکینہ نو کدی بہنا نو قیدی ہتھاں دے نال سابدی رہ گئی زہرا دی کمائی ve safere kite baaj bilawa hai dard satai Allah jane san Zainab ne kive kaid nibhayi 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 zalim de abha uthe aaya kado na Fatima Zahra na bare majme vich madi azmat layi khutbe pardi di Zahra di aayi Allah jane san Zainab ne kive kaid nibhayi Allah jane san Zainab ne kive kaid nibhayi Allah jane san Zainab ne kive kaid nibhayi zalim de labha uthe aaya jadon na Fatima Zahra na bare majme vich madi azmat layi khutbe pardi di Zahra di aayi Allah jane san Zainab ne kive kaid nibhayi Allah jane san Zainab ne kive kaid nibhayi Allah jane san Zainab ne kive kaid nibhayi aj bhi sakle janabe Mahdi ona rawa to hata mein on pera desha dina rawa uthe sham ya Zainab kal kaidi turai Allah jane san Zainab ne kive kaid nibhayi Allah jane san Zainab ne kive kaid nibhayi Allah jane ya Hussain 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 Shahbaz 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 Zainab hai Sham hai 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 Zainab hai Sham
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام على الشجرة النبوية والدوحة الهاشمية يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى يا ناصر دين الله، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين وعلى الأرواح التي هلت بفنائك. عليكم مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم جميعا. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، خصوصا سيدي ومولانا أبو الفضل العباس وأختيك زينب وأم كلثوم وبنتك سكينة. السلام عليك يا علي زين العابدين السجاد جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا محمد الباقر الألوم. السلام عليك يا جعفر الصادق الأمين. السلام عليك يا موسى القاذم باب الحوائج. السلام عليك يا علي الرضا البيد المدى، كن شفيئنا وشفيء والدينا في يوم الجزاء. السلام على أختك فاطمة المأسومة ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا محمد التكي الجواد. السلام عليك يا علي النكي الهادي. السلام عليك يا حسن الأسقري. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب الأسر والزمان. سيدي الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. أجل الله فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آله في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه